Hello everyone, my name is Dave. I'm one of the game designers for the MMORPG Ethereal Echoes of Yore, and today I want to go over a content proposal that we have been working on for the past couple weeks around the mechanic of relics. So relics are going to be, as this description says, artifacts that possess the power of legendary heroes and mythical beings, and when you equip these relics, they grant you a set of abilities that represent a class. So essentially, equipping a relic is basically an item that you'll be able to equip on and off, and by equipping that item in the relic slot, you will be endowed with the abilities for a particular class. Right now, the mechanic of choosing a class happens at the beginning of the game, where you go and you select your main class and then your subclass, and that's the class that you play throughout the entire game. And if you want to make another class, you will need to make an alternative character and choose that class separately at the starting screen at level 1. We decided that this would be an interesting way to shake up the genre a little bit and have it so that you are able to acquire a bunch of relics that represent different classes throughout your gameplay experience. So just to provide an overview of relics in general, to acquire a relic, the first thing you'll need to do is to do certain activities in the world that reward you with Primordium. And we haven't injected Primordium in the game yet, but it will be a generic currency that you'll be able to get by either defeating bosses, completing quests, doing events, and you'll be able to use this resource for a lot of things in the game, but one of them will be to acquire relics. And the way that we had proposed the idea of switching relics originally was that you would only be able to do this within a major city like Edravine or Finville or Narrowbane, and it would have a particular cooldown on it. So the idea is that you would equip a relic and you would go out and do whatever you want to do, and then in order to switch it, you would have to go back to a major city and see if your cooldown is up, and then you'd be able to switch it to another relic. And these relics will fall under particular disciplines. As you see, they're grouped here. So like if we look at Empyrean, an example of relics that are grouped under Empyrean would be the Priest, the Paladin once we release it, and the Crusader. And as you are leveling these relics, leveling a class from one discipline will level up that discipline, so that when you switch over to another class within that discipline, it will be the same level as the other class. So if we use the example of Empyrean again, if I level up a Priest, I will level up my Empyrean to 20, and if I switch over to Crusader, I will have that skill up to level 20. And so this makes it easier for you to switch classes based on different archetypes without having to re-level them back from 1. Below here are some examples of what the relics will look like. So if we look at the example here, we have the Dragonlight Sigil, which is the Dragon Knight relic. And when you equip it, it will grant you these skills, which are the Dragon Knight skills. Now, you also don't get all the skills of the relics immediately. You will basically have to level up that discipline, and once you get that discipline to certain levels, you'll have skills that unlock after that level is reached. So obviously you guys probably have a lot of questions about this relic system, and so we wanted to lay out some of the questions that we have for you to basically choose how we want to move forward with the relic mechanic. And so the question 1 will be, should you be able to switch within one discipline, or should you be able to switch relics between disciplines? And so for scenario 1, if you switch within one discipline, that means that when you choose your character, you'll basically choose your character based on one of these groupings here, and you would only be able to switch relics within that discipline. So you're aligning yourself with a singular discipline at character creation, and you can only switch between those classes within that discipline. Again, if we use the Empyrean example, you would only be able to switch between, it would be Priest, it would be Dragon Knight, it would be Paladin, and it would be Crusader. Those would be the 4 classes that you'd be able to switch in with that discipline. And so Alternative characters will be for playing classes within other disciplines in addition to unique game modes, like Hardcore, Iron Man, etc. And the other idea would be to switch between disciplines so that there is no discipline that you select at the character creation screen. Instead, you'd be able to play any discipline you want. And if you wanted to play a Spellblade within the Arcana discipline, you can do that. Now, in this system, you would have to level those characters from level 1 again, because your Arcana would be at level 1. And if you were leveling up Empyrean the whole time, you would have some of the things that you had preserved while you were leveling that character, like if you were using a sword, you would have your sword skill still really high, you would have your defensive skill still high, but the only skill that resets to 1 is the skill of that discipline, so it'd be Arcana. So you would have to level that back up. Now, we've also thought about ways of increasing the ability for you to level up these classes so you're not spending hundreds of hours leveling every single class for every single discipline. We want to figure out ways to optimize that for players as well. So these are the two scenarios that we want you guys to vote on. Just to recap, switching between one discipline, which is where you choose your discipline and you can only use relics within that discipline, or using any relics that you want throughout the different disciplines. The second question would be whether you should choose your first relic at the tutorial island or at the first class quest on Solitary Isles. Now, the issue with the first class quest on Solitary Isles is that when a player completes the tutorial island and goes to Solitary Isles, they are immediately overwhelmed with every single type of relic that they can choose, and all the class quests will be highlighted, and it might be a lot for the player to take in. On tutorial islands, you'll be able to choose your relic at the beginning, and you won't have to deal with that decision fatigue once you reach Solitary Isles. It's a minor thing, but we wanted to ask you guys to see what the best user experience would be from the player perspective. So to recap, choosing your relic at Tutorial Island or choosing your relic at Solitary Isles. The third question is pretty interesting because it does drive a lot of mechanics that we would build out very differently. And so we want to really think about this one. It's about when relics should be swappable. So the first scenario would be at major cities only, which I had alluded to at the beginning of this video. And so when you switch a relic, you wouldn't be able to do it unless you're in a major city. Now, the plus of this is that you won't have the opportunity to switch relics like right outside of combat. And it forces the user to potentially think about what they want to do at a major city, use the relic to accomplish that activity, and then have to return to the city to do another activity. The other idea would be that you can switch these relics out of combat, and that creates a different paradigm where you could potentially include different mechanics within a particular activity instead of the activity being centered around one relic. So if we give an example of a dungeon, you could have a boss that favors a particular party composition, and so you're able to switch relics right there. Or there will be different mobs within a certain area that you would feel better using a particular relic versus another relic. So there's plus and minuses to each of these. Major cities is a lot safer. Out of combat could present a lot of chaos, and we would have to think about ways of making this balance within PvP zones. So, safe zones, maybe in PvP. We have to think about that a little more. The last question we have here is centered around the gear requirements for gear and the relationship to relics. So the first scenario is that a piece of gear would require skill and discipline level to equip. And so the idea is that if you have a level 40 sword, that would require the player to have 40 elementalism and level 40 melee to equip. And so you would need to level up a discipline, and you would need to level up your sword skill in order to equip the relic. The other idea would be that you would require only the skill level of the sword to equip that sword. So the paradigm for the first scenario would be a lot more effort would need to go into leveling a discipline, and certain items would be kind of gate-kept behind a player investing time within that discipline in order to equip. The benefit of that is that you could potentially create better identity in classes because a player would be able to spend more time on a particular discipline to equip an item, as opposed to any class being able to equip a particular item. So in conclusion, I don't want this to be a super long video. Relics are a system that allows you basically to equip a class. And we have a lot of different questions that we wanted to ask the community. The first one being switching between disciplines versus within one discipline, starting your first relic at Tutorial Island or Solitary Isles, being able to swap relics at major cities or out of combat, and putting discipline requirements on items. Again, we want the community to vote on these, and depending on your vote, we will take those into consideration and build out a future for the game based on what we decide and discuss from the community. Again, we're super excited to introduce this mechanic to you guys, and we hope you like it. Thanks again. Feel free to subscribe, like the video, comment. Again, I'll be making more of these, especially more detailed versions of the roadmap document. Okay, thanks. Have a good rest of the day.